So cool. I've pressed the record button here. So and let's start. Hi and welcome, Bastian. It's so nice to have you here today because you are one of our chosen global SEO frontrunners. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Let's jump right out to into my first question. Can you share your story and why SEO?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I guess for me, it all started actually a very, very long time ago. And even though I'm only kind of turning 40 this year, I've been doing this kind of SEO in quotation marks, because I guess in quotation marks 20 years ago or more than 20 years ago, I think it wasn't really SEO. It probably was a bit more spam and try and error and these types of things than obviously what it is today. But like, I learned software development back when, and that was a time when I kind of also got my hands into building my first websites, predominantly driven out of curiosity, and because the whole internet thing was relatively new at that point in time. So we're talking like 1996, 7, 8. So those years. So kind of even pre-Google, where actually I started kind of doing SEO pre-Google as well, which was interesting, because obviously things work very differently. And then Google came along and said, well, look, here's links, and we're going to count links. And before it was, it wasn't the case. So I think that was a big change. But yeah, so I got into it predominantly due to curiosity. And I guess why SEO? I think the answer partly, or predominantly actually even, lies in the fact that, again, coming from a software development background, I just really enjoy the more technical side of things. I mean, it doesn't mean I only focused on that, but I had always like a bit of this favor towards like the tech stuff, and then obviously that kind of goes a bit hand in hand, and at some point at least, that like challenges around larger domains and larger migrations and scale and these types of things. So yeah, I think this is how I got into it. Started out as most people did, like as an affiliate back then, and then kind of at some point moved more, or in parallel did a whole bunch of like consulting work along the way, and then yeah, I got into. So I met my former partner back when. So he was more from the PPC side of things, and then we kind of teamed up and basically built what now is PKH. So the PK is so the agency that I'm currently running, at least where I spent most of my time with, I guess.
So now, many years later now, and congratulations with your birthday. And so you're still here, and what makes you're still fascinated about SEO, and what drives you today, running an agency and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I'm still here. I still enjoy it. I think this is also important, and I think if you don't enjoy what you're doing, then it's a whole different discussion. Even though, I mean, I guess in fairness, my job has significantly changed over the last years as well, right? So I mean, PKs is over 200 people strong. We have a variety of offices in Germany and in France. So obviously I spend a lot more time on actually doing things that I would have not done 5 years ago, as in like managing things and having paperwork on my desk and these types of things, which is actually the stuff that I don't really enjoy that much. So I'm kind of thankful for having like a very strong team, and also like a strong leadership team in the company that does take care of those things for a big chunk as well. But what drives me is just the fact that SEO in historically, I mean, of course there has always been changes, and Google rolled out an update here and a thing there, and we had new tech stuff to play with. I don't know, be that hreflang from like a more international standpoint. We had different directives for crawling at one point in time back when they introduced Google Search Console, which wasn't there all the time. These types of things. So there was things happening, but I guess if you look at the last like 12 to 18 months, I think what really changed, and I think this is probably the biggest thing that changed over the last years, and also probably is one of the turning points, I suppose you could probably say, in terms of what we're seeing right now, technology being available to humankind, right? So I think with AI, or more broadly, just the general topic around AI and the possibilities, etc. I think this is very exciting, and I guess so. I did a keynote last year in November. So it was pre the entire Chat GPT craziness, and I already spoke about stuff that I was seeing to come up. So we had part of the keynote was essentially kind of a live test. So we had pre-produced three pieces of content each, done by an AI at the time and by our editorial team. And then there was a live poll at the keynote, where I asked people to kind of pick what they like better, not necessarily to pick what they think is AI, but just like generally which one do you like consume, and which consume in a way that you enjoy it more, right? And it was absolutely crazy. It was roughly 1,000 people, and literally half of them per group favor the AI one. And at that point, I was like, maybe I kind of should get a bit more into this, because it really is a very interesting outcome. I mean, I was kind of hoping for something like that, but obviously, you know how it goes, right? So it was the early days. It was still like, I think it was the GPT, like, not, it was a OpenAI Model 3. So obviously that wasn't great at the time either. But still, I mean, if for certain type of content, it did a solid, okayish job. So, and what fascinated me was basically the fact that you, at that point in time, was already like, okay, you could do something with that. I mean, not necessarily saying, use it for content production, but just like generally, I think there were like sparks and glimpses of like, yeah, there's something that's going to be getting bigger, I suppose. And I guess that's what happened really. And so ever since, I think I had a pretty interesting year, or we as a company as well, because we kind of did a bit of a pivot as well. I guess from an agency standpoint, that was also needed, because I mean, there's a lot of like more overarching topics nowadays, and then AI or automation integration being one of the bigger topics now.
So now we are here in this huge paradigm shift. What challenges? What are the biggest challenges that you see from an agency point of view? And all this stuff is changing now. So what are the challenges?
I think the biggest one is actually the speed, like the speed of how fast things are actually changing, and how quickly the entire kind of, well, that entire area, if you wanna put it that way, is kind of moving right now, because literally, every day there is something new, and it is incredibly hard to just keep informed or be informed about what is going on. And then, I mean, that obviously leads to the second big challenge: what do I make out of it, right? So, what is at this point in time, predominantly the future outlook, versus what can I maybe use on production side? And then the question is, if you do use something on production side, how sustainable is that really? Because again, things are moving so fast, and then we have this hen egg problem. If I implement something now, and then I kind of put my eggs in one basket, as they say, and then this entire thing is basically like obsolete in 3 or 6 months time, then you have invested a whole bunch of resources or money or both, and then you can do it again. So I think this is the biggest challenge right now, just the insane speed, next to a whole bunch of other challenges that some are like more on the kind of society side of things, some are more on the ethical side of things, like we're talking about bias, or also things like the impact on resources. So like what does it actually cost to train and maintain large language models at scale? There's things like government regulations that are obviously missing, because as always, I mean, at least in Germany, but I suppose it's the same everywhere, governments are just way too slow on anything and everything that's somewhat remotely modern. So that is a big problem as well, right? So
Yeah.
there's a big chunk of stuff that comes with it. The fear of, or the uncertainty of some professionals that, maybe they will become obsolete at some point in time as well, et cetera, et cetera. You could name a ton of things, I guess. But yeah, the speed, if you ask me right now, and this is true from an agency standpoint, but also I guess for everyone else, to kind of try to stay informed and pick something that actually makes sense for you, or not, either way.
Do you have some tips on what you should not do with AI, and maybe some tips on how to approach it and how to benefit from it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there is this entire, and this is rightfully so, debate around how trustworthy is any type of information or fact that comes out of a large language model, and that this is not specific to a chat gpt, or something that a Tropic produces, or something that Google produces. It doesn't really matter. I think the foundational underlying issue that we're having is that, with Bing, or now ChatGPT, essentially it's an interface, partially smart, partially not, that sits on top of a large language model, and people ask questions against those models, right, or against those interfaces, and then the model responds. But if you look at the design of a large language model, it is literally impossible to fix what we call hallucination, right? You can reduce it, but you not necessarily can't fix it. And this has to do with the underlying architecture. So what it does, or what any large language model really does, is a prediction. Like they're not magically creating any kind of content, right? It's basically a prediction that follows a certain intelligence. We want to just keep it very simple. But at any given point in time, naturally, a prediction might be off. So you can train it to reduce hallucination, and you can probably, there's, I think, first a concept where even one kind of AI, if you so will, can fact check what another AI produced, etc. So you can reduce it, but it will never be, I guess, with this architecture. It might be a different architecture in the future. Then we're back to this, like, things are moving very fast. That's a different story. But like the way how large language models that are currently transformer based predominantly are done, that is a problem. And therefore, like, I think the biggest tip is that I would not trust anything that comes out of a large language model. So if you want to make that more practical from an agency, but also, I guess, from an in-house SEO perspective, I think it's perfectly fine to use those LLMs to do research, to do drafting, to do any type of thing, to potentially even produce certain bits and pieces of text. And we're doing that as well, because if there's a certain scale that can be, again, single language, it can also be a fantastic way to localize, to do drafts of localization, let's put it that way. I guess the big thing, though, is it always needs fact and sense checking. That's just the nature of the beast. And it might sound fantastic, and I think this is also the big danger. It might sound fantastic, but to a professional, it's just wrong. And I think this is the big challenge that we're seeing now as well with Google's SGE, so like the search generative experience. People, and predominantly, I guess, they're coming from an SEO background, are like, yeah, this is so bad, and this is like not working, and this is all wrong. Yeah, it's the nature of the architecture, right? That's the nature of the beast. It can't be right. Like, it potentially, yes, if there's enough data, then the prediction is most probably accurate, but not necessarily all the time. So you can complain about it as much as you want. There's not going to change the underlying foundational issue that a large language model has. So why is Google and others doing this? I mean, I guess the answer for Google partly is just the market pressure. For others, like OpenAI or Bing, I think the only smart thing they could do, they move very, very fast, rather than, and I think this was also part of Sam Altman, like the CEO of OpenAI, kind of an interview type of thing I saw. So yeah, we could have sat like in our room for like another 5 years and trying to make this perfect. But again, like, I think they did the only smart thing they could, right? Bing didn't have anything to lose, so like pushing it out onto the market is a pretty, in that regard, pretty smart way to do it. I guess
Let's
on the other hand,
pause.
and this is why I'm mentioning this. Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
pause for 6 months, right?
Yeah, that's just, yeah, exactly. That's the other debate. Yeah, I mean, this is just
And must
entirely
monitor
nonsense.
that.
not gonna
Yeah.
happen. No, but the point I'm trying to make, I guess, is that once the cat is out of the bag, and I think this is then also like a Google confirmed that in like the last earnings call, like this is the way it's gonna go, and there will be errors, and they will try to minimize errors, but there will be errors, and this is the, I guess, danger on the other hand, because I mean, us as professionals, we are questioning what comes out. But I guess and I mean that in no negative way, shape, or form, and no offense to anyone, but a lot of people will trust those information that comes out of an LLM. And therefore, I guess what we will see significantly more is most probably like a spread of just wrong information. I'm not even talking about like, scaled up like misinformation campaigns. This is a whole different beast again, which is obviously something that like an LLM type of approach would allow to scale, and already does allow to scale as well. But I think the bigger issue is just like, if you and I would live in ChatGPT and use that for our research, then there was a whole chunk of just wrong info that comes out of it. I guess that is a big problem, and that's a hard one to fix.
I saw here an AI generated article, and it was about what to see in Copenhagen, and it came up with a lot of stuff that doesn't even existed.
But it
Like,
sounded quite nice, right?
it did.
Yeah,
And there
that's my
was
point.
a restaurant that I wanted to visit, but except it wasn't. It
Yeah.
doesn't exist.
Yeah, and this is exactly the issue of that architecture. And I think, I mean, again, like I going back to my point from earlier, the transformer based architecture is great, but there's going to be, I think now there's going to be a massive push towards multimodality. That's the one big thing. So, essentially moving away from like this, standalone text experience for like the input, or the prompt as we call it, towards something that has multiple ways, shapes, and forms of input, and output as well, I suppose. So that could be imagery, could be video, could be as much as like a camera that kind of records a gesture and then takes it. I guess like first mini steps or baby steps. You can already see what Google integrating Bart into Google Lens, right? So I think this is one thing. The other one is like the recent push on their medical model, like the Palm 2 Med, where they also allow multimodality. So you could like dump in like an MRI scan basically and run the diagnostics based on the image rather than having to describe what's on the image. So I think, and this I think is a massive thing because it feels much more natural to use that. So you're like, okay, what's on this, and this is like an image, and you don't have to like try to strangely describe what you're seeing there, right? And this obviously reduces that. And I think the other thing that I'm currently quite excited about is like, so when we as humans, like, we walk to a crossroad, right? Like we have not only like one sense that is telling us it's busy or not, like the eyesight, but for example, it's also the audio that our brain is recording. So like multiple senses essentially combined. And I think this is an approach that we were seeing for like AI as well. Not only relying on one, but relying on multiple types of senses, if you stick with the terminology for a second, to be more accurate. And I think these are things, but I think on the other hand, what I would expect though, and I'm not an structural or like let's say architectural expert, but like looking at what's happening, I think there will be different types of LLMs popping up rather sooner than later as well. I mean, there are some first like approaches on different architecture, and I think that has to happen because of the aforementioned issues, not only hallucination, but also like economical impact and a whole bunch of other things like retraining and et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's something happening rather sooner than later. And then maybe some of those issues that we're now discussing are completely obsolete. And then we're back to what I've been saying in the very beginning. Things are just moving very fast.
Yeah, very fast. There's a new tool every day,
Yeah,
right?
not just one. It's wild. So
Yeah.
there's because you asked for a tip. So there's a website that I've been using quite a lot as an inspirational source. There's an AI for that.com. You probably have heard of it. But essentially, it's you could say like mini search engine for AI tools. And I've kind of been keeping a bit track for like a whole bunch of presentations that I've done over the year. Like when I did like a screenshot in I think it was must have been February this year. It's had something like 2,000 tools, and then I did one like a month later. It says like 3,500 tools, and I think I did one recently. It was like 5,000 or 6,000.
Whoa.
So it's absolutely wild. But but the issue then again is like, and I think this is also a big thing. Like a lot of the smaller tools, they will die. They're gonna die like in the next 6 to 12 months, just because the big models or the big tools are just going to absorb them, right? A lot of those tooling that currently comes out is like, it's a bit like this gold rush thing. So like people are trying to solve one very specific task and make a quick buck out of it, which is fair enough, but I suppose it's not sustainable. So like when I would then have to make the decision of like implementation and costs, I'm like kind of be cautious about like what is really there in 6 to 12. I mean, no one really knows, but what's really there in 6 to 12 months time, and am I really like willing to trust this vendor that charges me like another 20 bucks for this AI tool? Because well, not everything that has AI on top of it is really AI under the hood, if that makes any sense. So I think this is also a very interesting thing currently happening.
It is, and actually, maybe just a few weeks after the ChatGPT launch, I just saw on Twitter a little tool that helped people with AI do something with a Twitter. I don't remember the tool name, but they said, okay, because of ChatGPT, we are shutting down. And it was like,
Yeah, yeah,
now people could just go to ChatGPT and get probably some of the same stuff out of it.
that is
So
true.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
you
especially the code interpreter is fairly powerful. I mean, obviously, it is again, it needs some right now some human brain capacity. You could probably say to prompt it and then to review, but like the speed you're gaining with just having access to like, okay, let's create this code snippet, which you would like when I started doing software development. I mean, literally, it was line by line, right? We rarely had even assistants that did like auto completion for like certain type of functions and different type of languages. Even that was like, I recall back then when I started writing like simple stuff like HTML, it was all basically it was Notepad back when. And even like, so I did C and C++ as well. I mean, this was all gibberish as hell, and there wasn't much help there. To now you're like, okay, can you just build me this, that, and the other, and you get like a full kind of monolith kind of a situation, somewhat ready to run by itself. I mean, again, might need some corrections, etc., etc. But again, like remember, we had the very early days of like AI, and then if you compare that to the current capabilities, I think I'm rather impressed. Yeah.
if you do you have some tips or ideas on the potential for tools like Code Interpreter when you this tool there when we are talking about SEO and data and what are the perspectives here?
Hmm. I think one of the big strong suits, at least right now. I mean, next to obviously like, okay, let's can you create me this type of source code real quick? I mean, what's pretty cool with the current implementation is you can like easily and natively upload files, and obviously those files can be CSV or any different type of data. So what I think those are really strong at. This is also a use case that we're using it for right now. Is basically, here's the data of said campaign. Can you like tell me what happened? So you have bumps, ups and downs, or a different type of anomalies that you wouldn't like. I mean, that you could pinpoint by yourself, obviously, but then again, that would require time, and again, human resources. And instead you just like let it run. And this is the thing, like when the input is pretty precise, so like let's say data, or the same is also true for text actually. So if you there's a word of a difference if you take a given text and dump it into a generative AI and tell that thing to rewrite or reformulate, rather than again like creating something new, which is a whole different process. For these types of things, and this is what I mean with data interpretation, is I think this is actually a really really cool use case. So for example, like we have and obviously, and I think this is true for agencies, but also like for in-house teams at the same time, like if you have to do reports, I mean obviously you would kind of go through the data, you would comment the data, etc. this is stuff that you can at least draft with like the capabilities that OpenAI offers right now, and then you can obviously and should sense check and double check and prove, but like it takes away a lot of the time that you would normally need to invest. And this is also true for a whole bunch of other implementations. So like we've been using, like we did a kind of AI hackathon thing internally just a couple of weeks ago, just to kind of see what current pain points do we have, and like how can we solve them. And then there were obviously, as you do, there were different working groups, etc. And for one of the groups, we set the task to kind of see how we could become more efficient with email, because I hate emails with a passion. It's just a beast, and then there's way too many of them, and then how it goes. There's like 10 people on this email chain, and it's very long, and blah blah blah. Right? I mean, this is all a whole different conversation to be had, and but so one of the things that really was quite cool. So like we investigated a bit of like implementations of LLMs into email, and we ended up with one solution for. So we are on the like PKs is predominantly running on Office 365, so on the Microsoft environment, and we came up with kind of an integration that's called Mail Maestro. And the cool thing is it has two killer functions. I mean, next to like you can create an email draft and then tell them like or the software how to politely do something for you, but like the two killer functions are email summaries. So like for long threads, it gives you like the gist out of it, and it also extracts like action points for you. So if you have to do something based on what's actually written, and it works really well, I have to say, like surprisingly well. So like those things, if it's proper input or properly structured input, we should probably say. I think if you find the solution that works for you, it can significantly leverage. You can significantly leverage them to just be more efficient or save time or spend time on something that just makes more sense, rather than having to read this entire dumb email chain 3 times and then miss probably two things that you need to do anyways, right?
I really think that this is a cool idea because there's so much information and information overload in these times,
Yeah,
right? So
exactly.
summarizations of stuff in in general can just help us, right? Getting to the
I mean,
point
have
and
you have you seen the feature that Google just announced like 2 days ago, 3 days ago, like the
no.
kind of SGE whilst browsing, so like the search generative
Oh yeah, yeah.
experience is the one on top, and then they now like in labs you have it in the sidebar as well, right? So, or you said you can trigger in the sidebar, I should probably say, and it goes the same route, right? What it does is does summarize what you have on said website, and it gives you like key action points, and you can ask questions against the content, right? And I guess it goes a bit into the same direction. I mean, I can already see that people won't be happy about it, as they never are when Google does something like this. So, it could reduce time on site. Fair enough. It could, it could
Yeah.
do a whole bunch of other things, and it could be wrong, as people would then point out. I get it, but I think the point here is it can be also a very significant efficiency gain. Yeah.
What aspects when it comes to SEO deserves more attention?
Well, I mean, I think this is always the funny like debate that people have, like what is more important um, than the other, and I guess then the question is always like it depends. So I think you know in a bit more serious kind of way, I would imagine from what we are seeing, it's depending on the stage of where a website is currently in. So especially if it's new websites, they and if they haven't like set up properly, then oftentimes it's like foundational underlying issues, like crawling issues, or just like generally accessibility issues, and these types of things, right? I think this has changed a bit in recent years, though, with if sites rely on something like a WordPress, for example, that is rather not that much of an issue, because those platforms out of the box work really well. And then if you dump in like a Yoast or any type of other plugin, then I think that does actually do a quite good job for most of the basics. But like then we deal a lot with custom built like larger websites, and then all of a sudden it becomes an issue because there is weird parameter issues, there's weird JavaScript, there's a whole bunch of other like crazy things going on behind the scenes, and you're like, why is this actually happening? That doesn't make any sense, right? So that's what I mean. Like it depends on the stage, and also I guess the like what a build of the website is. But as soon as it's like more custom built, you will see a whole bunch of like underlying technical issues that often prevents sites from performing well. I think then, of course, on the kind of in the mid spectrum, like if we talk about like the more kind of is it worth or does it deserve ranking? I mean, it often starts with foundational issues like there's not even content there, or if there's content, it's like yeah, it's content, but it's not content. It doesn't have any like there's no justification as to why Google should rank you because there's like already a million other ones that have done the same thing, and like there's just like you're not breaking through. So why would you? Especially if it's newer or smaller domains, then of course they're also lacking like any type of authority that either personal authority or kind of a more like domain-ish link type of authority. I guess both at the same time. So again, it comes a bit down to where in what stage the site currently is. But yeah, I think there's no one answer. My or our general answer is so back a long time ago, I've been like explaining SEO as like with this three cornerstones, and one is tech, the other one is content. I mean, tech also includes accessibility, and the other one is authority or links or whatever you want to call it. And I guess that is still true. I mean, the weighting has probably changed, over the years, back and forth, left and right. But it's very hard to do well without kind of taking care of all of those. Obviously, priorities are different. If you're a large brand, then you most probably don't have an authority issue, rather a quality or accessibility issues most of the time.
Thanks. Is it is this AI hype? Is it overrated? And how do you think AI will change the future of SEO?
I think it's not overrated. I think, if anything, it's rather underrated because most people don't understand how fundamental that technology is actually going to change the future. And not only SEO, but much more broadly speaking. I mean, if you think about it from the other side, there's so many possibilities right now. We're like, okay, let's talk about verification systems for a minute. I mean, there are authentication systems that are based on voice. Essentially, it will be broken rather sooner than later because it is already extremely simple to clone any type of voice, and they're not perfect yet. But just yesterday I saw a study where they did a huge survey, and I think it came back to 80+% didn't see or wouldn't recognize that said voice was already cloned and is fake in reality. There's a whole bunch of scam stuff already going on. So like, you know, I think people are like, they are naturally afraid of what they don't understand, and that is fair. There is a whole bunch of like big implications, society, etc. So I think if anything, it's rather like AI in general, I think is rather underrated. I mean, there is though a crazy hype right now. If you break it down a bit further on the more generative AI side of things, especially on like the text as well as video. Well, sorry, image production, not necessarily video. Video is coming, but like more on the text and image production side. I guess though, again, it stems from the fact that that is what current models are predominantly good at and what people can see as an output, right? I think though the same, or at least the underlying tech, if you think about advancements, for example, on the medical side, this is fantastic, and I think this is one of the things that I'm like extremely excited about. Just like better diagnostics, you know, more accurate kind of feedback, you know, I'm not sure how that is globally. Again, I can only like speak from the experiences that I have, but like a lot of times, doctors are overbooked. You don't get availability. Then you have the issues that they, no offense again, but like, they don't have the time. So you're just a number. It's like 2 minutes. What are your concerns? Like ABC, yeah, can only be this. Is that, I mean, that is maybe based on their experience, but is that really the best way diagnostic can go? Most probably not. So, if you can do that with a very specific model that is only, and I think this is part of the trend that we've been seeing, there will be a lot more like specialist models on specialist things, and then we might have some like overlying or underlying, either way, bigger container that is kind of aggregating that. But if you look at because I mentioned a Palm 2 medical from Google, I mean, these things are going to be breakthrough. They're going to be breakthrough at some point. And also, like I saw like an article on, I think it was on Time just the other day, where there was actually a man. I can't recall his name, but he was paralyzed, and they basically implanted with a double bypass. They implanted him like two chips, and then basically they trained an AI, so he was watching movements of a hand. So they trained that AI with how his brain would react, and they fed it back into the chip. And then now, when he's watching a screen, he can basically move parts of like his body again. Which is, I mean, this is absolutely insane, right? And there's a whole bunch of those things that are happening right now that people obviously are not aware of. But like, I think, again, fast forward 5 years, that's going to be massive, and this has a very, 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 very big impact on life. You could probably say, for that said person,
And
or
hopefully
quality of
for
life
the
at
good.
least. Yeah.
Hopefully for the
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I mean, this is the other side, right? Where there's good, there's always bad. Unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast. It's already happening. I mean, there's a whole bunch of scam already going on. This is a big problem. It's probably only getting worse. I mean, there's already things like, so if you're following the news, like there's an implementation that's called Fraud GPT, which unfortunately does the same thing. And then the issue is right now, a lot of those, just scam emails, for example, they're easy to spot because they're just poorly done. But if you have like a trained model, they will be very convincing, right? And there's a lot of those, like I saw a bunch of cases around Europe where people are basically, calling a person, and it's not their parents calling or someone else calling, but it's actually a robot calling, or a cloned voice kind of a thing calling. And then that leads into a whole bunch of issues with them wiring money because they fear that they are in danger, etc. So it's crazy. The amount of shit, excuse me, that can come out of these things is equally dangerous, because at some point we might be going to like AI that's much more capable of what we're seeing right now. And then what's going to happen if like a rogue nation is getting possession of that. There's a whole bunch of implication on that front. I don't know, like whether it's good, there's always going to be bad, that's for sure. So yeah.
Do you have a few cool tooltips? Like, some
Yeah, I'm sure I do. I mean, again, it's such a broad and loaded question, because there's just so many
but
right now. But I think if we kind of go mentally at least through like some of the more common use cases, I think that might nail it. That might nail it down a bit. So I think from a content generation or text generation perspective, I mean, there's a whole bunch of them out there, right? And it really depends a bit on the task that you set out to achieve. But I think they all have, and there could be a just bar, or it could be a phrase IO, or it could be any of those. But I guess the big benefit, if you think about it a bit conceptually, if you would go with a ChatGPT, then especially with the availability of plugins where you can then extend it to scrape data from other sources, or you can plug in a tone of voice that you already have and then tell like the model to use that as the writing style. These types of things, I think, are big advantage of ChatGPT right now. So But yeah, let's not kind of, because everyone is using ChatGPT. So I guess that's. But I think beyond the average, like Joe, that kind of prompts something that just not doesn't result to anything. Um, yeah, plugins are big on that, and then proper prompting. So you could also look into AI PRM, which is a Chrome extension that allows for like more complex prompting or helps with complex prompting. So I think this is pretty good. But on the tooling side, I think so. We have been Mail Maestro I mentioned from an email side of things, just to kind of summarize, kind of be more efficient on the email side. For meetings, which is also, I guess, a big productivity topic, if we just want to stick with that, there's a whole bunch of them. One, probably the most famous one, is Otter, or Otter.ai, which does essentially transcripts and do summaries out of it. Again, I mean, no offense to the guys, I love the tool, but like everything that's not English language doesn't really work so well right now. So this is important to keep in mind. If we like, I mean, I guess you guys are familiar with that problem. We have the same with German
Yes,
as well.
exactly.
So that's a bit frustrating, but I guess this is something that is going to be solved at some point as well. Just when there's multilingual training, so you train in one language and the output can be the different one, and I think then this is a solved issue. Um, I think those are the ones that we see frequently, I guess. Yeah, and I think beyond that, again, there were some, like for example, I used to use a lot, kind of a smaller tool called uh, Chat PDF, which is essentially like a same concept, but you dump in the PDF and it does an extraction, and you can ask any question, because I read a lot of like those longer research papers and stuff, and then it's actually quite handy to say like, well, give me the gist out of it, and what is about XYZ, and then it does. So, but again, that will be absorbed, right? Because you dump it into in the end of your bigger models, then that's done. But at the beginning, it wasn't possible. So this is what I mean with like something that's there and then it's not there anymore. So yeah, but beyond that, again, like where is an AI that for that.com, or there is an AI for that.com, is probably what I would go for. Like you can dump in everything and anything that you need to find. It's probably the faster way. Um, yeah,
So cool. And thank you for the tips. And thank you so much, Bastian, for being here today. It was a pleasure talking to you. And thank you for all your great tips and your perspective on this huge, what you call it, explosion, AI explosion right now, and,
yeah, probably
and,
true.
and how we
Yeah,
can navigate through this. So thanks a lot for today.
thank you for having me. Much appreciated.